Happy days, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers. Well, it's time to look at the penultimate episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 2, Tribunal. Chief O'Brien and his wife Keiko are scheduled to go on vacation, but as a workaholic, he finds it difficult to let go and just leave. Out of uniform and carrying his bag, O'Brien reminds Dax of various things that need attention as he makes his way to the turbo lift. She assures him that she will look after the station as if it were her own child, although this does not seem to make him feel any better. Kira seems annoyed, albeit in a good humor, and she reassures O'Brien that the rest of the crew are perfectly capable of running the station without him for a week. He reminds her that he will be available over subspace, at which point the Major politely requests that he get out of her hair. O'Brien takes his hand and gets in the turbo lift as Dax reminds him to have a good time, something he seems to have forgotten. As soon as the turbo lift leaves, Commander Sisko emerges from his office and tells Dax and Kira that O'Brien has been driving him crazy all day. The turbo lift returns as he speaks, and O'Brien starts to tell Sisko something about a recently installed subroutine, but the commander orders him to disembark Deep Space Nine. Only after O'Brien is gone do Sisko, Kira, and Dax allow their true amusement to show through. O'Brien hurries along the promenade on his way to the runabout and nearly drops several pads he is carrying. An airborne human helps to move with the load, but O'Brien reassures him he has it under control. As O'Brien walks away, the man seems to recognize his face, but not his name. O'Brien stops and realizes whom he had just seen and turns back. Recognizes Raymond Boone, one of his former colleagues from the Rutledge. Boone recognizes the name Miles O'Brien immediately and is glad to see him after so long. Boone is impressed with O'Brien's status as chief engineer. Boone says he left Starfleet 8 years ago, now resides in Volant 3. A confused O'Brien points out that Volant 3 is on the Cardassian side of the demilitarized zone. Boone admits that the new Federation-Cardassian treaty puts him and his fellow colonists in harm's way. But as he reminds Ladarium, he says the Cardassians leave him alone, as they use the material for their warp drive. O'Brien is nonetheless surprised and does not understand how Boone could live among the Cardassians after what happened to the border wars at the Sedlick 3 massacre. While Boone says the incident convinced him to leave Starfleet, it convinced O'Brien to stay in. The two plan to meet the next time Boone is on the station, but Boone loses his friendly air once O'Brien is gone. Boone enters his quarters carrying a data pad. He has recorded the exchange with O'Brien, and now he sorts through it to find a portion where he stated his name. O'Brien! Miles O'Brien, it says. On their way to their vacation destination, Miles is engrossed in something he is reading in a pad and asks Keiko if he brought the holocam along. He asks if he was supposed to do so, and she reminds him that they went over a list of items to bring along last night in bed. I was dead as soon as my head hit the pillow, Miles says, his mind obviously elsewhere. He sarcastically claims there must have been someone else in their bed, as he only remembers falling asleep. Dismissing her husband's sarcastic remarks, Keiko asks what he is reading, and to her chagrin, he informs her it is a technical update manual. Switching subjects, Miles asserts that it might have been a good idea to bring Molly with them on their vacation and wonders if she'll be okay with the Petersons. Keiko sarcastically tells him that Molly likes the Petersons more than her own parents, reassuring him Molly's fine. However, he suggests traveling back to Deep Space Nine to pick up both the holocam and Molly, which would only cost a half day's worth of vacation time. A sterling from Keiko causes him to rescind his suggestion as he goes back to reading. After a moment of awkward silence, Keiko asks how many he brought. He instantly asks what she means, although he knows she is referring to his update manuals. Just a few, he claims sheepishly. Keiko simply stares at him, her arms crossed. Miles finally takes his hand and sets his manuals aside. He tells the computer to please send by Minazaki Koto. Keiko is still annoyed, but a smile begins to appear on her face. As the music plays, Miles gets up and kneels beside Keiko, bringing their faces close to one another. The two of them embrace and begin kissing one another, but as they do, they are stopped by Keiko's chair, which refuses to allow Keiko to lean back any further. Laughing, she asks if the runabout chairs recline, to which Miles admits he wishes they did. You're an engineer. Do something about it, she says, playfully adding, I'll make it worth your while. They resume their embrace and forget any hostility they may have felt earlier when the computer announces that a vessel is approaching. The computer identifies the ship as a Hideki-class Cardassian patrol vessel. Miles tells the computer to raise the runabout's shields as he returns to his seat. The Trident sends an emergency subspace message to Deep Space Nine, but the Cardassians jam their transmissions and hail them. With hint of contempt, O'Brien opens the channel with the vessel and identifies himself. On the other end is Golovec, who politely informs him that they have spoken before and orders him to shut down the runabout's engines to prepare for an inspection. Although Miles points out that they are nowhere near the Cardassian border and Avec thus has no authority to search the runabout, Avec claims the question of authority can wait. He wants O'Brien to comply or he will take preemptive action. As Avec says this, the computer alerts Miles that the sensors have detected a photo lock-on from the Cardassian vessel, an indication that Avec is prepared to open fire. Giving O'Brien 10 seconds to comply, Avec terminates the communication. Reassuring Keiko that neither of them has done anything wrong, Miles lowers the runabout shields. Avec and two other Cardassian soldiers immediately beam aboard and materialize behind him the moment he does so. Avec thanks Miles for his cooperation and informs that the Cardassians have orders to arrest him. Keiko is aghast as Avec tells the other soldiers to search the ship, and a baffled Miles asks what the charges are. You have the right to refuse to answer questions, but such refusal may be construed as a sign of guilt. Avec informs him, to which Miles demands to know what the charges are. Avec asks if Miles would like to deny all knowledge of the crime, when Miles again asks what the crime is. Avec interprets his response as a no. Keiko insists they have rights as Federation citizens. Somewhat dismissively, Avec acknowledges that their rights under the Cardassian Articles of Jurisprudence will be protected. Miles demands to speak to Commander Sisko, and with a mix of sternness and compassion, Avec assures them that they will contact Sisko and see that Keiko is returned safely to DS9. He goes on to explain that Miles will be taken to Cardassia Prime, where he will await trial. Miles seems to realize the futility of arguing and pushes Avec out of the way, attempting to grab Keiko, but one of the Cardassians shoots him with a phaser. Keiko cries out as her husband collapses and is beamed aboard the Cardassian ship along with Avec and one of the officers. The remaining officer restrains her from reaching the command console, and she screams her husband's name. The setting is now Cardassia Prime. A government building looms prominently in the distance, and large view screens placed strategically on the walls of various buildings display a Cardassian man giving a speech. A pair of soldiers forcibly escorts O'Brien into a darkened room and walk off-screen as a bright light shines on him. "Remove your clothes," a deep and malicious voice commands. The overlight bright light shining on him moves in a circle as he speaks. "My name is Miles O'Brien. My rank is Chief of Operations, Starfleet. I'm a Federation citizen," he finally states to the owner of the voice, a uniformed Cardassian whose features remain anonymous. "Remove your clothes," the man repeats bluntly. O'Brien repeats his statement as well, still somewhat disoriented, but the soldiers who brought him in grab him as he does so, slamming against a nearby wall. Each soldier grabs the side of O'Brien's shirt and together they rip it off. Forcing him to the ground, they remove his pants as well. "Would you care to make a confession?" the faceless voice asks. O'Brien repeats his statement yet again, although less adamantly this time. Still motionless, the officer orders the soldiers to process O'Brien. O'Brien's head is restrained as one of the soldiers uses a pen-shaped device to perform a retinal scan, causing a picture of him in a dossier to appear on a nearby screen. The soldiers drag O'Brien to a sleek chair with arm and leg restraints. He manages to punch one of the soldiers and begins to get up, but the other restrains him and administers a sedative. As the sedative begins to take effect, the chair shifts to a horizontal position and O'Brien once again proclaims his Federation citizenship. The defiance of his original statement all but gone this time. One of the soldiers clips a sample of O'Brien's hair while the other uses a pair of pliers to remove one of his molars. Finally, pale blue light engulfs O'Brien's body, presumably forming a holographic record, and the chair returns to its vertical state as a Cardassian woman enters, formally clothed. She approaches the now silent O'Brien and asks the interrogator if O'Brien has been processed. Observing the cut on O'Brien's forehead, she remarks with a tinge of annoyance that the prisoner was not to be harmed. One of the soldiers explains that O'Brien had to be restrained and there brings in a black jumpsuit-like garment. Now assuming a more amicable demeanor, he hands the garment to O'Brien and motions for him to stand. The woman walks alongside O'Brien and apologizes sincerely for the way he has been treated. She introduces herself as Makbar, the Chief Archon, and assures him that she wants his stay to be as comfortable as possible under the circumstances. By circumstances, she means the holding cell, still in appearance to those aboard DS9, to which she has led him. McBar follows O'Brien into the small cell and informs him that she has scheduled his trial to begin in 2 days. He has assigned the Venerable Kovat as his public conservator, or lawyer, which Makbar takes as a good sign. After all, she explains, many feel Kovat to be the best legal counsel in all of Cardassia. However, when O'Brien asks again what he's being charged with, she takes on a decidedly less comforting tone. "All in good time, Mr. O'Brien," she says as she exits the cell. "All in good time." Jason O'Brien is left, still naked and holding the black jumpsuit, to wonder what his fate will be. Aboard DS9, Keiko sits in Sisko's office with Sisko before her, Odo at his side. The commander informs her that Starfleet Command has ordered the USS Enterprise D, Prokofiev, and Valdemar to the Federation-Cardassian border near the demilitarized zone, hoping that the threat of endangering their treaty with the Federation will give the Cardassians incentive to release O'Brien. However, this is not good enough for Keiko, who insists her husband is being tortured. Odo, who served aboard DS9 when it was Terran Nor under Cardassian rule, confirms that the use of torture is standard Cardassian interrogation policy, further worrying Keiko. She reveals that O'Brien spoke to her on numerous occasions about the Starfleet officers whom the Cardassians took prisoner at Setlik 3 and what they were like after their release. The thought of being like them disgusted and scared him. As much as Sisko wants to help, he reminds her that they do not know where O'Brien is being held. Seeming to understand his logic, but not wanting to admit it, Keiko leaves the office. Sisko and Odo follow Keiko into Ops, attempting to reason with her, but the conversation is cut short and Major Kira announces that there is an incoming transmission from Cardassia Prime. It is Makbar, who introduces herself as the Archon representing the Cardassian Empire in his case against Miles O'Brien. While she claims it is not possible for Sisko to see or speak with O'Brien, she assures him that O'Brien is being treated with great care and respect. Warning her that O'Brien had better be treated properly or he will hold Makbar personally responsible, Sisko assures her his warning is a threat. Makbar goes on to announce that the charges against Chief O'Brien will be revealed at the trial as per Cardassian jurisprudence. Keiko finds this outrageous and demands to know how they are supposed to prepare for a trial without knowing the charges, but Makbar claims the verdict has already been reached. The trial is to demonstrate how it was reached. While Makbar offers Keiko the opportunity to attend the trial, she tells Sisko that only family members of the accused enjoy this privilege. Odo interrupts to inquire about O'Brien's Nestor, a type of advisor. The court has assigned O'Brien a conservator and a Nestor by default, but Odo volunteers to take on the role of Nestor instead. When Makbar informs him that the Nestor must be an officer of the Cardassian court, he reveals that Gul Dukat made him an officer 4 years ago in order to testify in criminal cases during the Cardassian occupation of Bajor. Reluctantly, Makbar agrees. Odo now takes the stage, inquiring as to the penalty O'Brien faces for his crimes. Makbar informs him that O'Brien has been scheduled for execution next week. Keiko is appalled by the notion of condemning a man to death before the trial even begins. But as Makbar puts it, we believe in swift justice. With that, she terminates the transmission. Once the transmission ends, Odo tells Sisko that he and Keiko will leave immediately for Cardassia Prime in the exit and turbolift. Meanwhile, Sisko tells Kira to conduct a complete security sweep of the stage for anything that might explain what has happened. Noting O'Brien's well-known dislike of Cardassians, Kira asks what she should do if she finds he is guilty. Sisko grimly admits he wants to know as well if it is true. O'Brien lies in his cell and an older Cardassian man approaches. Entering the cell, the Cardassian speaks in a soothing voice and warmly introduces himself as Conservator Kovat. Kovat sits next to O'Brien, who patiently asks why he would need a lawyer if he has already been sentenced. The Royal Conservator, Kovat explains, has helped the accused to concede the wisdom of the state. O'Brien refuses to dignify such a statement but responds and simply laughs. Undaunted, Kovat maintains his comforting demeanor and relates an old Cardassian expression, "Confession is good for the soul." In addition, he adds, hearing the guilty confess makes the public feel better, and while such is not the primary purpose of the trial, he points out that it is not a bad side effect. O'Brien looks at Kovat as if he were insane. Kovat seems to place his reviews the information collected during O'Brien's processing. When O'Brien asks what he has been charged with, Kovat dismisses the question and claims there is no need to worry about it at this point. O'Brien calls the entire process insane and gives up on getting any straight answers. What O'Brien may or may not have done, Kavad reassures him it does not matter in the long run. The purpose of this trial is to demonstrate the futility of behavior contrary to good order, he says, calling the entire process uplifting for everyone. Not everyone, O'Brien corrects him, but the words fall on deaf ears. Kavad enthusiastically describes how all crimes are solved in Cardassia, and even the poorest of the poor can walk the streets in the dead of night safely. O'Brien informs Kavad that he is not guilty and holds the entire process in contempt, an attitude Kavad claims will put on a good show. Before Kavad leaves, O'Brien asks if he has ever won a case. Winning isn't everything, Kavad proclaims as he walks away. Meanwhile, the crew of DS9 has discovered plenty of evidence, all of it pointed directly at O'Brien. 24 photon warheads have been stolen from a weapons locker, and Jadzia Dax, with the tricorder, points out that they were beamed out of the locker in such a manner that would require a transport expert. Bashir sees what she is getting at, but he refuses to believe it. Furthermore, Kier has verified via command logs that O'Brien was in the locker minutes before the beam-out took place. His voice print is even logged in the computer. Frustrated, Bashir wonders why anyone would steal photon warheads. Kier points out that a Maquis raider stole photon launchers from a Bolivian freighter only 2 weeks ago. Launchers, but no warheads. They only find more questions as they dig deeper, such as how the Cardassians found out O'Brien was carrying the warheads and who in the Maquis he could have been giving them to. Odo visits O'Brien in his cell to see if it's been treated properly, and when O'Brien mentions that one of his molars was removed, O'Brien states that he is familiar with the practice. All Cardassians are required to give one of their molars to the Bureau of Identification, a procedure normally performed at age 10. While Keiko has come with Odo, she is sent out to visit her husband in his cell. However, Odo grimly informs him that families are always invited to trials and executions so the public can see them weep. The thought of this appalls O'Brien, and he says he does not want Keiko to be present. He just asks whether the Cardassians told Odo anything about the charges against him, which they have not, although Odo has an idea. Rather than explain the theory outright, Odo uses indirect questions to test O'Brien's responses. He asks if O'Brien has ever had dealings with the Maquis, but the chief isn't sure of what he means. Rather than explain, he asks if O'Brien knows anyone in the Maquis, which he denies. Finally, he asks if O'Brien's ever sold weapons to the Maquis, which he also denies with visible frustration this time. O'Brien wonders if anyone will ever tell him what he supposedly did, at which point Odo realizes O'Brien truly does not know anything. He reveals that Commander Sisko contacted him several hours ago to inform him of the missing warheads, and that they suspect the warheads were in the cargo bay of the runabout. This begins to clarify things for O'Brien, as he knew the Cardassians found something in the cargo bay. However, he denies any knowledge of the theft and begins to break down. O'Brien confides in Odo that he has been in Starfleet his entire adult life, and that during that time, no one has ever questioned his loyalty. Odo observes as O'Brien speaks, getting new insight into his colleague's personality. While O'Brien admits he is not an angel, he claims he has never cheated nor stolen, and tries to be the best human being he can. Odo tries to comfort him by reassuring him that being accused of a crime is not a dishonor, and Keiko will be at the trial but not weeping. Neither will you, he adds. I'll be the Archon to see the unwavering eyes of an innocent man. Calling from the guard, Odo exits the cell. O'Brien thanks him for coming, and he exits. Dax discovers that while O'Brien's voice opened the weapons locker, the voice was a fabrication assembled piece by piece from existing records. As she shows Bashir, the peaks of sound clips are slightly out of sync when compared with a recording from the real O'Brien. Meanwhile, Kira has narrowed a list of potential Maquis suspects down to 12 people who were on the station on the day of the theft and isolated Boone, who several merchants are talking with O'Brien on the promenade. Sisko tells security to find Boone at once. Broadcasting live to Cardassia, Makbar announces the commencement of O'Brien's trial. She sits at high podium emblazoned with the Cardassian emblem. To her left sit several young children, while to her right sits the chair from which witnesses testify. Kavad sits in front of the podium and informs her that his client is ready. The children tap their knuckles against the sides of their seats respectively as O'Brien enters and takes his place at a raised seat facing the Archon. The Archon offers O'Brien a chance to spare your family and the Federation further humiliation by confessing. He declines without hesitation. Keiko enters with Odo, and Makbar, per Cardassian articles of jurisprudence, offers her a chance to disassociate herself from her husband and testify against him. Giving O'Brien a supportive look, Keiko adamantly refuses. She and Odo sit directly in front of O'Brien on the main floor next to Kavat's seat. Makbar is about to call the first witness when Odo interrupts her. Before the hearing proceeds, Odo requests they be allowed to confer privately with Kavat, which perturbs Makbar. She concedes that it is Odo's first time serving as Nestor, and therefore he may not be accustomed to protocol, but the Nestor has no authority to address the court. He begs the court's indulgence, and Makbar reluctantly does so. Kavat begs Odo not to ruin the case for him, as he is only a year away from retirement. The idea that an innocent man could be convicted seems incredible to the conservator when Odo informs him about the new evidence. Regardless, however, he reminds Odo that no evidence may be submitted after the verdict has been reached. Odo attempts to press the matter, but Makbar impatiently interrupts their conference to ask Kavat if they are ready to proceed, which he hurriedly claims they are. Odo does not concur. Despite Makbar's warning, Odo requests permission to address the court and proceeds to do so over Makbar's objections, asserting that O'Brien's conservator refuses to bring to light new evidence which prove his client's innocence. Kavat can hardly believe his ears as Odo speaks, and Makbar exclaims that Odo is out of order. Given the situation, Odo frankly demands to know what he is supposed to do. Respect Cardassian judicial procedure, Makbar claims, pointing out that were this a Federation courtroom, he would ask that she do the same of their procedures. Odo uses this point as a segue to the fact that no crime has been committed against Cardassia, and therefore the trial should be taking place in a Federation courtroom in his estimation. When he mentions that the crime in question was committed aboard a Bajoran space station, a flabbergasted Kavat proclaims he is extremely humiliated and denounces his case as he attempts to leave the courtroom. Makbar sternly orders Kavat to sit down before warning Odo not to try the patience of the Cardassian people, for he will find the punishment very unpleasant. I regret that I have no teeth to give you a bureau of identification, he concedes with disdain. Makbar explains that she fully expected the Federation to come up with fabricated evidence to confuse the issues at hand, and as such, shows that no new evidence may be submitted. Back on DS9, Sisko and Kira stand beside a seated Boone and attempt to extract some information from him. Talking to O'Brien does not mean he is guilty, Boone claims. After all, they're old friends from the Rutledge. When Sisko reassures him that they do not plan to turn him over to the Cardassians, Boone observes that he has no reason to think they will since he has done nothing wrong. Sisko tells Kira to hold Boone for further questioning. Meanwhile, Bashir enters the infirmary to find the lights malfunctioning. He attempts to access them through the computer and is about to leave when a voice from behind tells him not to turn around. A man stands in the shadows, his features indistinguishable, and claims that Boone is not one of us. As Bashir realizes the man is from the Maquis, he asks for more information. All the man will say is that the Maquis knew nothing of the theft of the warheads. Bashir turns around seeking further information, only to find the man gone and the lights once again functional. On Cardassia Prime, Golovic can be seen on the same wall-mounted view screens as Makbar was previously. He describes the Maquis as savage, Federation-born killers as the camera switches to an interior shot of the photon torpedoes from O'Brien's runabout, which he cites as evidence of his accusation. After Avec confirms for Kavat that the Maquis are based in the demilitarized zone, the conservator asks how Avec knew the weapons were intended for the Maquis. Avec claims to have received the information from reliable sources, but does not reveal the nature of his sources, citing national security concerns, causing Odo to interrupt the proceeding yet again. O'Brien wants Avec to reveal his sources, and more to indulge Odo than out of her own curiosity. Makbar asks whether Avec can do so. Avec claims the details if I obtain the information cannot be revealed without risk to national security. The answer Makbar accepts, but Odo does not. He presses for information on how Avec learned the warheads were in the runabout again. Avec quotes reliable sources, for which he gives the same rationale. Although Odo is still unsatisfied with Avec's answers, Makbar patiently dispenses with the issue. The trial, she says, is already the longest in the history of Cardassia. Kavat resumes his questioning and promises to be as brief as possible. A pair of Bajoran deputies escort Boone to the infirmary aboard DS9, where Sisko and Bashir are waiting for him. Bashir asks why Boone has not spoken to his parents in 8 years, and Boone claims he never got along with them. His parents, however, told Bashir otherwise. Sisko continues to connect the dots, adding that Boone divorced his wife of 15 years and was discharged from Starfleet at the same time he stopped talking to his parents. Bashir finishes by explaining that all these things happened shortly after Boone's return from Setlik 3. On hearing all this, Boone seems to know what they are talking about and attempts to push his way past the deputies guarding the door. He is restrained and placed on a biobed. "So romantic vacation," O'Brien remarks to Keiko. She assures him that there will be others, but does not share her optimism and asks that she not be present at his execution. The conversation is cut short as the bell announces Makbar's return and the room stands respectfully. Taking her seat, Makbar announces that the offender will testify. O'Brien informs her that he has nothing to say to the court, but is compelled to testify under Cardassian law. Kavad meanwhile suggests to Odo that he advised O'Brien to confess and throw himself on the mercy of the court. "I've never heard a Cardassian court showing mercy," the constable counters. "That," Kavad insists, "is not the point." But Odo declines despite Kavad's urging. The enemy of Odo interrupting before refusing to speak now is lost on Makbar. Kavad approaches the witness stand and inquires whether O'Brien was abused as a child. Annoyed, O'Brien wonders what Kavad is talking about. He hypothesizes that perhaps O'Brien's parents were abusive and that perhaps the chief hated them. O'Brien informs Kavad he loved his parents, and Kavad suggests spousal abuse on Keiko's part. He generally describes her as the most wonderful, supportive person I've ever known. Kavad respectfully apologizes for the question, claiming he's only looking for a reason why a fine man such as O'Brien would become a criminal. Perhaps O'Brien could assist him, Kavad suggests, but O'Brien says he is not a criminal. "Well," Kavad declares in a resigned tone as he resumes his seat, "I tried." With Kavad done, Makbar takes over, asking O'Brien how many Cardassians he has killed. He's not killed any since the Federation-Cardassian War, but she requests a count that includes the war. Odo asks what relevance such information has, but she insists O'Brien's war experiences are very much relevant and repeats her question. O'Brien admits he is unsure of the number. What that begins as a neutral question becomes very much loaded as Makbar asks whether there was a war in place and O'Brien saw for the Cardassians now that the war is over, and whether he has stated on numerous occasions the bloody Cardis can be trusted. He reluctantly admits that is true, at which point Kavad chimes in and concedes the verdict on his client's behalf. Despite O'Brien's objection and adamant insistence that he is innocent, Makbar orders him to stand down. Before the trial goes any further, a guard escorts Sisko and Boone into the courtroom. On seeing the newcomers, Kavad objects, but Makbar, necessarily telling at Boone, silences him. She urges the court to proclaim that the Cardassian system of jurisprudence has worked once again and a guilty man has been brought to justice. However, she claims to see in O'Brien the potential for rehabilitation. In the spirit of furthering Cardassian Federation relations, she says she will set aside the verdict and release O'Brien to the Federation's custody. As the courtroom clears, a Devlin and Kavad asks Odo what has just happened, still in shock. Odo remarks dismissively to him, "You won." Kavad whispers to himself, "They'll kill me." Sisko explains to Lehom that the Boone Miles encountered before leaving was actually a Cardassian spy who replaced the real Boone 8 years ago, as genetic tests from Dr. Bashir confirmed. The first became suspicious when Boone's wife spoke of how radically different he was when released from imprisonment after the Cardassians captured him at Setlik 3. Keiko was confused as to why the Cardassians wanted to frame her husband. As Odo points out, it was never about Miles. The entire scheme was an elaborate plot to give the Cardassian Central Command an excuse to destroy the Federation colonies on the Cardassian side of the demilitarized zone by making it appear as if the Federation was supplying weapons to the Maquis. After all, if the Federation itself was supporting the Maquis, the Cardassians would have no choice but to use military action. When Sisko entered with Boone, Makbar knew he had the ability to embarrass the High Command with all of Cardassia watching. The O'Briens then resumed their interrupted vacation, albeit without any bags or holocam, which is perfectly fine with Keiko. Well, that's good. So anyway, let's take a look at some background information with this episode, beginning with story and script. The original title of this episode was Dark Tribunal. The plot of the episode was based on a statement made by Gul Dukat in the Maquis Part 2. On Cardassia, the verdict was always known before the trial begins, and it's always the same. As Ira Stephen Barrett later stated, quote, "That one gave us a concept for the whole episode." And now on to casting characters. Armand Shimmerman and Kara Lofton do not appear in this episode. This episode marks the first known Star Trek appearance of recurring alien background actor Mark Major. And now onto the production of the episode. Production designer Herman Zimmerman said he took the inspiration in the set design for this episode from George Orwell's 1948 book, 1984. And of the final look of Cardassia, Zimmerman explained, quote, Spartan, uncompromising and merciless are all adjectives that you could use to describe Cardassia. The courtroom was a redress of the holosuite set. This was the first episode directed by Avery Brooks. B.C. Cameron, who worked as his first assistant director on the installment, recalled, quote, It was kind of hard because he was very closed. He wouldn't really share a lot of information. However, Brooks himself enjoyed directing the episode, particularly for directing Colleen and Fritz Weaver, as well as portraying Cardassia. B.C. Cameron's difficulty with Avery Brooks' directing came to a head while they were working on one particular scene. Quote, He called us in a Quark's bar, Cameron remembered. It was pitch black in there, because we weren't shooting in there. It was dark and I went in, and he said, I want you to make sure I get what I need. And I said, It's kind of difficult sometimes, because I come to ask you questions and then you act like you don't want to tell me things, or that I'm bothering you. He said, I guess you don't understand my sense of humor. And I said, To be honest with you, sir, I'm not sure you have one. He kind of reared back his shoulders, turned around, a little half grin came on his face, and he said, What does he want to know? And I said, I'd like to know, when you have a scene in your mind, to tell us what you want. Come with me, he said. Brooks proceeded to tell Cameron the precise camera moves and blocking he had in mind for the specific scene they were working on, sources which Cameron extremely appreciated. Robert Stromberg of Illusion Arts Incorporated created the map painting of the city of Cardassia Prime for this episode. And now finally, let's take a look at some continuity and trivia surrounding this episode. The Star Trek Deep Space Nine companion lists Tribunal among annual Torture O'Brien episodes, so referred to as O'Brien Must Suffer episodes. The discussion to which Vec alludes occurred in Playing God, when O'Brien contacted Vec for assistance in exterminating a colony of Cardassian voles that made its home aboard DS9. At the time, he was simply credited as Cardassian officer. Andrew Robertson had likened the Cardassian brain to a reptilian portion of the human brain, which, in Robertson's words, quote, knows what boundaries are and how to care of itself so that species survives. Consequently, Cardassian philosophy places order above both freedom and equality, resulting in an Orwellian society where the good of the state is placed above that of the individual. Kavad epitomizes this philosophy in his defense of the legal systems. Quote, Whatever you've done, or charges against you, none that really matters in the long run. The trial is to demonstrate the futility of behavior contrary to good order. Sending the USS Enterprise D to the DMZ was a tribute to Star Trek The Next Generation, as Tribunal was the first Star Trek episode after TNG's series finale, All Good Things. This is the first mention that the Cardassians used cosmetic alterations in order to infiltrate their enemies. Later examples were Seska in Star Trek Voyager, whose true identity is revealed in the episode State of Flux, and Gul Dukat, who masquerades as Anjol Tanan in DS9 Season 7. This technique also played an important role in the third season episode Second Skin. This episode marks the first appearance of Cardassia Prime on the DS9 TV series. The planet had previously appeared in the TNG two-parter Chain of Command Parts 1 and 2. So overall, I think this is a pretty unique episode, and yeah, let's just say that the way that Cardassians do their trials is, let's say it's a bit extreme, so yeah. So overall, I give the episode Tribunal 4 warp cores out of 5. Anyway, tune in as we take a look at the final episode of Season 2, the Jem'Hadar. So, until then, live long and prosper, everybody.